My beloved brothers and sisters, prayer is not a ritual. It is the breath of the soul. It is the bridge between the natural and the supernatural, the earthly cry that touches the heart of heaven. Too often we treat prayer as if it were a duty to fulfill, when in truth it is a divine invitation to enter the throne room of God, where miracles are born and souls are saved. When we speak of intimacy with God, we are not talking about religion or ritual, but about relationship. Many people know about God, but they do not know Him. They speak His name, but their hearts are distant. Intimacy with God begins when we approach Him not as a faraway figure, but as a loving Father who invites us into His presence. It is in that closeness that prayer transforms from mere words into communion, from duty into delight. When you step into intimacy with God, you step into a place where burdens are lifted and peace flows like a river. Intimacy is built in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when your heart whispers to Him in honesty. God does not require grand speeches. He longs for truth spoken from within. Just as a child runs into the arms of a parent, unafraid to speak of joys and sorrows, so we must come to God with all that we are. In that safe place, masks fall away and our prayers become real. It is not about impressing God's eloquence, but about exposing our soul before Him, trusting that His love covers and heals every wound we bring. Prayer intimacy is less about asking and more about abiding. It is resting in His presence, soaking in His Spirit, and letting His voice speak louder than the noise of the world. Sometimes intimacy with God is experienced not in the many words we say, but in the silence we keep, listening for His gentle whisper. In those moments, He reminds us that we are not forgotten, that we are deeply loved, and that He's handing us even when we cannot see the way forward. This stillness births confidence, and confidence births miracles. When you walk in intimacy with God, prayer becomes a two-way street. You not only pour out your heart, but you also learn to hear His heart. His desires start to shape your desires. His dreams begin to inspire your prayers, and His vision becomes the compass of your life. Suddenly, prayer is no longer about getting God to bless your plans. It becomes about aligning yourself with His eternal plan. In this alignment, doors open, paths clear, and what seemed impossible begins to manifest, for you are walking hand in hand with the Almighty. Intimacy also transforms the way we see others. When we are close to God, His compassion begins to flow through us. We pray not only for our needs, for the lost, the broken, the hurting. The more we dwell in His presence, the more we carry His heart for the world. Souls are drawn to Christ, not merely by our words, but by the fragrance of His love flowing through us. Prayer that springs from intimacy becomes a light in the darkness, drawing hearts toward hope and salvation. Finally, intimacy with God is the secret place where miracles are conceived. Before a miracle appears in the visible, it is birthed in the invisible. When your heart is near His, your faith grows bold, your spirit rises strong, and you begin to expect the supernatural as natural. In that closeness, mountains move, chains break, and lives are transformed. Intimacy is not only the foundation of prayer, it is the power of prayer. And when you live in that intimacy, your life itself becomes a testimony of God's nearness and His mighty works. Persistence in faith means holding on to prayer even when the heavens feel silent. Too often, we grow weary when answers do not appear instantly, forgetting that delay does not mean denial. Just as a seed takes time to break through the soil, so too do our prayers often require seasons of waiting. Persistence is the posture that says, even if I see nothing today, I will trust God tomorrow and the day after until His promise is fulfilled. Faith that persists is faith that refuses to surrender to discouragement. There is a hidden strength that is only revealed in persistent prayer. Every time you come before God again and again, your spiritual muscles grow stronger. Doubt tries to whisper, stop praying. Nothing is changing. But persistence shouts louder, my God is faithful and He will not fail. But each repeated prayer is not a sign of weak faith, but of unwavering faith. You are proving not only to yourself, but to the spiritual world that you will not be shaken and that determination moves the heart of God. Persistence also breaks through barriers that ordinary effort cannot. There are moments when the enemy sets up walls of resistance, hoping you will give up before breakthrough arrives. But persistence chips away at those walls day after day, prayer after prayer, until what was once impossible crumbles before the power of God. It is like striking a rock repeatedly, not knowing which strike will cause it to split, but believing that each strike matters. Persistence is the key that eventually opens the locked door. Faithful persistence teaches us to wait on God's timing rather than forcing our own. The waiting season is not wasted, it is preparation. While you are praying, God is shaping you, refining your character, and arranging circumstances you cannot yet see. What looks like a delay is often a divine setup for something greater than what you asked for. Persistence keeps you steady in the waiting room of heaven. So when the answer arrives, you are ready to handle the blessing with wisdom and strength. Persistence in faith also inspires those around you. When your family, your friends, or even strangers witness your unwavering commitment to prayer, they are reminded of the power of faith. Your persistence becomes a testimony, a living sermon that encourages others to hold on to God in their own struggles. It is not only about the miracle you are waiting for, it is about the ripple effect your steadfastness creates in the lives of others. Souls are drawn to Christ when they see a believer who refuses to quit. At the heart of persistence is the belief that God always keeps His word. He may not come when you expect Him, but He will come right on time. Persistence is the bridge between promise and fulfillment, between prayer and miracle. It is the choice to keep knocking, keep seeking, and keep asking until heaven opens. And when it does, the breakthrough will not only answer your prayer, but also reveal the glory of God to all who witness it. Persistence in faith ensures that your story will not end in defeat, but in victory. Alignment with God's will is where prayer shifts from being self-centered to Christ-centered. Many approach prayer only with lists of personal wants, hoping God will endorse their plans. But the secret of power in prayer lies in surrender. When you pray, Lord, let your will be done, you are inviting heaven's wisdom to rewrite your story. God's will is never smaller than your own. It is always greater, deeper, and filled with eternal purpose. The moment you align, you step into a flow of grace where doors open, not by your striving, but by His design. To align with God's will is to trust that His vision sees farther than yours. You may only see the valley before you, but He sees the mountain beyond. You may only notice the storm today, but He knows the rainbow waiting tomorrow. Prayer in alignment is not a battle to convince God, but a yielding of your heart so He can lead you into paths of life. Alignment transforms prayer from begging into partnering, from desperation into confidence. For when you walk in His will, you know that no power of darkness can derail what God Himself has ordained. This alignment also brings peace in the midst of uncertainty. How many times do we worry trying to control outcomes that are far beyond our reach? Yet when your heart bows to His will, a holy calm descends. You no longer fear the future because you know the author of the future. Prayer in a line may not always change your circumstances immediately, but it will always change your perspective. Instead of asking, why me? You begin to pray, use me. Instead of fighting against the wind, you learn to set your sails and let His Spirit carry you forward. When your prayers align with God's will, you discover a supernatural boldness. No longer do you pray timidly, uncertain of the outcome, but with authority, knowing heaven backs your words. Jesus declared, if you ask anything according to my will, it shall be done. That is not a promise of random chance. It is a guarantee of divine backing. Such alignment turns ordinary prayers into unstoppable decrees. You are no longer echoing your own desires. You are releasing the heartbeat of God into the earth. And nothing can silence the heartbeat of God once it is spoken. Alignment also refines our desires. As we draw nearer to God, the things that once consumed us, selfish ambitions, shallow dreams, temporary gains, begin to fade. We start to crave what He craves, the salvation of souls, the healing of broken hearts, the advancement of His kingdom. This shift is not loss, but gain. For in trading your smaller dreams for His greater ones, you inherit joy that does not fade and victories that cannot be stolen. Prayer then becomes the place where your desires are purified till they mirror His. Finally, alignment with God's will ensures that every answered prayer points people back to Him. Miracles are no longer just for your blessing. They become testimonies that reveal His glory. Souls are drawn to Christ not merely because of what He does for you, because your life reflects His perfect plan. The world does not anymore need to see more of what man can achieve. It needs to see what God can do through a surrendered life. Alignment is the secret that turns ordinary believers into living evidence of God's power and love. Intercession for souls is one of the highest callings of prayer, for it takes the focus off ourselves and places it on the eternal destiny of others. When you kneel before God on behalf of another person, you are standing in the gap between heaven and earth, pleading for mercy, grace, and salvation. Intercession is love in action, the willingness to carry someone else's burden to the throne of God. It is not casual prayer. It is wrestling, weeping, and believing until chains break and light pierces the darkness of a soul in need. Every great move of God throughout history has been birthed by intercessors, men and women who refused to stop praying until heaven touched earth. Intercession is often unseen, done in secret rooms away from crowds, yet its impact shakes nations. You may never stand behind a pulpit, but on your knees you can reach further than any preacher's voice. One prayer offered in intercession can snatch a soul from despair, pull a prodigal back home, or ignite revival in a weary heart. The world may never know your name, but heaven does, because your prayers carry the fragrance of Christ's love for the lost. Intercession requires compassion that goes beyond words. It means feeling the weight of another's pain as though it were your own. It is the heart of Christ beating within you, for He Himself ever lives to intercede for us. When you intercede, you echo His mission to seek and to save that which was lost. Prayer becomes more than a personal pursuit, of blessing. It becomes participation in the redemptive plan of God. Through intercession, you partner with Christ in the greatest work of all, drawing souls into the embrace of salvation. There is a power in intercessory prayer that breaks strongholds no argument or persuasion ever could. Logic may fail to convince a hardened heart, but prayer can soften it. Words may fall on deaf ears, but intercession prepares the soil for the seed of the gospel. In prayer, walls of resistance collapse, veils of deception lift, and spiritual blindness is healed. Intercession fights battles in the invisible realm, and victories won there manifest in transformed lives here on earth. Every soul saved through prayer is a trophy of grace and a victory over darkness. Intercession is also a fire that ignites revival in communities and nations. When believers cry out not only for their personal needs, but for the outpouring of God's Spirit on the lost, heaven responds. Great awakenings are never born out of comfort, but out of the cries of intercessors who refuse to let go until God moves. When a church or a family unites in intercessory prayer, entire atmospheres shift. What seemed like a hopeless generation becomes a field ready for harvest. Intercession does not just pray for one, it prays for all, believing that none are beyond the reach of God's mercy. Above all, intercession transforms the intercessor. As you pray for others, your own heart expands, your faith deepens, and your spirit grows stronger. You begin to see people not as problems, but as precious souls for whom Christ died. This change in perspective makes you a vessel of love and a channel of grace. Intercession is not just about others being saved. It is about you becoming more like Christ, whose life was one long intercession from the cross to the throne. And when you live with such a heart, souls are drawn to Christ through the overflow of your prayers and your life. Expectancy in belief is the spark that turns prayer from mere words into living power. To pray without expectancy is like planting a seed and never looking for a harvest. When you kneel before God, you must rise believing that something has shifted, that heaven has heard, and that His answer is on the way. Expectancy is not arrogance. It is confidence in the faithfulness of God. It is the childlike assurance that a loving Father will not ignore the cries of His children. Without expectancy, prayer becomes routine, but with it, prayer becomes a force that shapes reality. Belief with expectancy transforms the atmosphere of your heart. Instead of anxiety, you carry anticipation. Instead of fear, you carry joy, knowing that God is working behind the scenes. This expectancy gives you strength to endure trials with peace, because you know the story is not over until God has written the final chapter. Every prayer uttered in faith carries the seed of a miracle, and expectancy waters that seed until it bears fruit. The difference between a heart that gives up and a heart that prevails is the conviction that God will do what He has promised. Expectancy also honors God. When you expect Him to move, you are declaring that He is trustworthy, powerful, and good. Doubt whispers that maybe God will not come through, but expectancy silences doubt by saying, "My God is able." This attitude glorifies Him because it reflects the truth of His character. He delights when His children take Him at His word, when they cling to His promises as unshakable. Prayer that rises with expectancy is like incense that pleases His heart, because it shows that you know who He is: faithful, mighty, and merciful. Expectancy in belief fuels bold declarations. Instead of timid prayers that shrink back, you pray with authority, speaking life where there is death, hope where there is despair, and healing where there is pain. This is not presumption, but faith anchored in His word. The Bible declares, "Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find." Expectancy holds God to His promises, not because He forgets, but because He desires that we stand on them. When you pray with expectancy, you release words that carry weight, and heaven moves in response to that faith. Living with expectancy also keeps you from settling for less than what God intends. Too many accept mediocrity because they have lost the vision of what God can do. But when expectancy fills your soul, you refuse to settle for half measures. You pray for healing until it comes, for salvation until the lost return, for revival until the fire falls. Expectancy will not allow you to quit because it sees beyond the present struggle to the promised victory. It trains your eyes to look for miracles so that when they arrive, you recognize them as the hand of God at work. Finally, expectancy in belief becomes contagious. When others see you live with unwavering confidence in God's promises, their own faith is stirred. Your expectancy becomes a testimony that draws others closer to Christ, for they begin to hunger for the same hope you carry. Prayer with expectancy not only changes your life, but radiates outward, igniting faith in families, churches, and even nations. The world is tired of powerless religion. It longs to see living faith that dares to believe God still works wonders. Expectancy is that light, and through it, miracles and souls are drawn to Christ. Prayer as a lifestyle means it is no longer an event on your schedule, but the rhythm of your very being. Too often people treat prayer like an emergency exit, something to use only when life catches fire. But true prayer is meant to be the air we breathe, the steady pulse that sustains our walk with God. When prayer becomes your lifestyle, you do not need a crisis to call on heaven. You live in constant communion with the one who holds your life. Every moment becomes sacred, and every breath becomes a prayer rising before the throne. When prayer is woven into your daily living, your heart stays aligned with God's presence. It is not only about set hours of devotion, though those are vital. It is about carrying the atmosphere of prayer into every part of your day. Whether you are working, walking, resting, or serving, you remain aware of God's nearness. Prayer becomes less about a posture of the body and more about a posture of the heart. And when your heart beats with prayer, even the ordinary moments of life are charged with the extraordinary presence of God. Living a lifestyle of prayer also builds unshakable strength in your spirit. Life's storms do not announce their arrival. But when prayer is your constant companion, you are never unprepared. A prayed up soul stands firm when the winds howl and the waves crash. You do not scramble for faith in the middle of the storm because prayer has already anchored you deeply. Such a lifestyle ensures that no trial can uproot you, for your roots are continually nourished by the streams of God's presence. A life of prayer overflows into love for others. When prayer is constant, self-centeredness dies and compassion grows. You begin to see people not through the lens of judgment, but through the eyes of Christ. The grocer, the colleague, the stranger in the street, all become souls worth interceding for. Prayer as a lifestyle means you carry others to God continually, not as a duty, but as delight. And in that intercession, you become a vessel through which God's mercy and power flow into lives around you. Such a lifestyle also keeps your spirit sensitive to God's voice. The more you live in prayer, the clearer His whispers become. Decisions that once caused confusion now find clarity because you are tuned to the frequency of heaven. Temptations lose their power because prayer sharpens your discernment, and opportunities align because your steps are guided by His counsel. Prayer is no longer just what you do before making a choice. It is the ongoing conversation that directs every choice. And that continual guidance leads you to walk in victory and wisdom. Finally, prayer as a lifestyle transforms you into a living testimony. People are drawn to Christ, not just by what you say, but by the unmistakable fragrance of His presence in your life. Miracles follow you not because you chase them, but because prayer has positioned you under the open heavens. Your life becomes a sermon without words, a beacon that points others to the reality of God. When prayer saturates your living, miracles and souls are not occasional. They become the daily evidence that Christ is alive in you.